Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. I'm Alan Goodwin. I'm the Deputy Project Manager for the UDO. We'll get started momentarily as people get admitted and get settled. And then we've got a presentation. I'd like to introduce a couple of my colleagues from the UDO team. Kevin May and Sandra Montgomery are here with us. I'd also like to acknowledge that we have Andrew Blumenthal from the Planning Commission. Don't see any other Planning Commission members here. If I missed you, I apologize. I think Andrew's the only one I'm seeing this evening. So with that said, we'll get started. I'll share the screen. We've got a presentation, some slides to share, and then we can have some time for questions. So let me go ahead and start sharing. And somebody can give me a thumbs up. Deborah, I see you. Can you see my title slide on the screen? Give me a thumbs up. Okay.
I think everybody's on
I'm going
mute.
to take that as a thumbs up.
We see it.
Okay. Thank you. So we will present some slides on the proposed text amendment that we're here to talk about tonight. And I think by now, most of us have been in enough Zoom meetings that we can figure out how to enter things in the chat feature of Zoom. So if you have questions along the way, you can enter them in chat. And if we're able to respond to them in real time, we can try to do that. Or certainly at the end of the presentation, we'll stop and go back and catch up with the questions or comments that have been entered in chat, and we will try our best to respond to them. So we're only going to focus on the contents of the subject text amendment number 2023-130. We're here tonight to receive and consider feedback from the session. And if you have questions on other elements of the UDO, we don't really have time to talk about that in this meeting. However, we welcome them, but we ask that you address any other questions or comments that are not related to this text amendment to us by email, and we will respond to you. I'll pause a moment here if you want to go ahead and take a photo of this screen so that you get our email address, or if I can come back to it later, or perhaps somebody can put it in the chat. Kevin and Sandy can do that. Okay, let's move on. A little background before we get into the text amendment. The UDO is the city's primary regulatory implementation tool for the policies that were adopted in the Charlotte Future 2040 Comprehensive Plan. The UDO was adopted by the City Council in August of last year. However, it did not become effective until June 1st of this year. So there was a period where people were getting used to it and reading it before it actually went into effect on June 1st. It is and always was intended to be a living document, meaning that it is subject to change and revisions through text amendments, such as the one that we're proposing currently, so that we maintain its relevancy, clarify its intent, or address new concepts, uses, or best practices. Also, as we start using a document, we may find that there are things that are perhaps unintended consequences that need to be addressed or fixed. And so we can also adapt the UDO to do those kinds of things as well. This is the 6th text amendment since the UDO was adopted. And here are the previous text amendments. The first was one dealing with land clearing and inert debris. It was the text amendment that was designed to deal with a issue that was pressing at that time. So it created some new standards for LCIDs, landfills. We also proposed 2023-057, which would adjust uses for commercial zoning in centers place types. That was denied by the council primarily because it included some revisions to standards about drive-through windows that council was not particularly comfortable with, and so they did not approve that text amendment at that time. 2023-58 was a previous cleanup change text amendment for minor changes, and all three of those, 56, 57, and 58, we filed prior to the June 1st effective date. And then subsequent to that, 93 was to allow existing single-family duplexes that were in general commercial or office flex zoning districts to be considered as permitted uses. The previous districts that were translated to CG and OFC did allow those, but when they were translated, the new UDO zoning districts did not, and we did not want to leave those existing single family and duplex dwellings out there hanging, being not a permitted use. And then finally, just Monday night, City Council approved text amendment 2023-106, which allows for multifamily development in general commercial CG and regional commercial CR zoning districts if they are in a centers place type, because centers place types, if you're familiar at all with the place types, are those areas of the city where we want higher density uses such as multifamily residential. So we addressed that with that most recent text amendment, which was just approved on Monday. So an overview of the current text amendment that we're here to talk about, 2023-130. We filed this text amendment on September 25th. It is, as I mentioned, the second so-called cleanup text amendment of the UDO. It will address a number of items that have been identified as issues that need cleanup by either the community or by our own staff. City staff, either in planning or in other departments. This is the second of the virtual community engagement sessions that we've had today. We had a previous one at noon, and this is session number 2. And our current schedule calls for holding a public hearing at the November 20th City Council meeting and a decision by City Council on their meeting on Monday, December 18th. So I'm going to go, the next few slides they touch on all of the specific standards or sections that this text amendment is designed to modify. It's a little technical. It's a little bit, very detailed. So bear with me, but we want to be thorough and make sure that we cover the things that are in this text amendment so that you get a good understanding of what it is this text amendment will do. So it may seem a little bit detailed, but we'll get through it. So the first thing is that we added language that states that in all zoning district articles, there is language that now says that prescribed conditions may apply, and it tells where to go to find each of those prescribed conditions. And there, by the way, the prescribed conditions for uses are all in Article 15 of the UDO, which is the section on uses. We were finding that some people, as they looked through the zoning district sections of the UDO, were missing the fact that there may be prescribed conditions for certain uses in those zoning districts. And so this is just language that clarifies that and points them in the right direction. The next is that we are adding a time period for temporary uses that are not listed in the use matrix. The use matrix is also in Article 15. It's a table, a lengthy table, that shows which uses are allowed in each of the several zoning districts. And there are some that are identified as temporary uses. And the temporary uses typically have a prescribed condition that sets a time limit for the temporary use. However, from time to time, there may be a use that comes along that somebody wants to do as a temporary use that we have not included in the use matrix, but which the zoning administrator may say, yeah, that's fine to do as a temporary use. So this will set a maximum of 90 consecutive days for any temporary use like that, something that we haven't identified, but that we think is okay as a temporary use. This will just set the maximum number of days. Next, the UDO has some incentives for creating affordable housing units, and we want to make sure that we clarify what the affordable periods are for each of those. And so in our development bonus, which is typically a height bonus that we've been using now for a few years in our TOD districts, those have a 30-year affordability period for any affordable housing that's created through that bonus program. So that was not previously specified across the board. So this clarifies that. And then if you you're allowed to build a quadruplex dwelling in neighborhood 1 zoning districts under certain conditions. But if you do, one requirement is that one of the 4 units in the quadruplex needs to be set aside as an affordable unit. And this sets the affordability period for that unit at 15 years. Right, next. We clarify and explain the placement of accessory structures. We were having some confusion about that some people were wanting to locate accessory structures outside of the parcel, perhaps in the right of way. And I think we clarify that the accessory structures must be located on the same parcel as the principal structure that they support. We created a new use definition and category called commercial fitness center. This is a place like a Planet Fitness or a Gold's Gym, clearly a commercial use, and it is distinguished from a private recreation club, which are things like a neighborhood swim club or a neighborhood tennis club. So the private recreation club are uses that we may be fine with in a neighborhood place type, a residential area, but clearly a commercial use like a Planet Fitness or a Gold's Gym, we probably do not want. And previously they were bundled into the same use category. So we separated out the commercial fitness center. And just to clean it up, we removed the example of health club from the definition of personal service establishment. And now those will be considered to be something like a commercial fitness center. We relocated the neighborhood 1F zoning district site layout conditions from Article 4, which is the neighborhood 1 zoning districts, to the prescribed conditions in Article 15. Realize this is really deep in the weeds, but again, we wanted to be clear about what we are doing in this. And we were finding that we had some standards in this N1F district in Article 4 that really were more like prescribed conditions. And so we just moved them over to the prescribed conditions. We think that they're more likely to be seen there. We are addressing some issues surrounding the parking and storage of unlicensed vehicles in neighborhood 1 and neighborhood 2 and manufactured home zoning districts. This was some language that had been in our previous zoning ordinance that did not get carried over to the UDO, and it was a concern to our code enforcement people. So at their request, we brought similar language from the old ordinance into the UDO. We are clarifying the standards for driveways and parking areas for duplex, triplex, and quadruplex buildings. There is a limit on the cumulative width of driveways and parking pads that can be in the front of buildings for duplexes, triplexes, and quads. And the language in the UDO was open to creative interpretations. And so this is an effort to try to clarify that for a better understanding. We're also providing more flexibility in parking structure design. We were finding that our design standards for structured parking were rather stringent, and were creating problems for designers, particularly on small sites, where on certain frontage types, and a frontage you can think of as a street primarily, they had a number of options for how parking garages were designed. We expanded where they could use option C, which is activating the ground floor and screening the upper floors of the parking garage. Prior to this text amendment, certain frontage types were limited to either option A or option A and B. And option B is similar to option C, only it requires that the parking structure be pushed back from the setback 10 feet, and you really lose a lot of available parking garage space, floor space, if you will. And on small or narrow parcels, that becomes a real problem trying to design these things so that they function properly. So that is a fairly significant change to the parking structures. We are adjusting the prescribed conditions for neighborhood commercial establishments, and these are things like the corner store. These are commercial uses in neighborhoods that have maybe been there for a while, and they're operating like a neighborhood business. One of the things that you can do is a restaurant or bar, but we're adding a prescribed condition that if you do a restaurant or bar as a neighborhood commercial establishment, that you will not be able to do outdoor entertainment. You don't want the noise that would result from spilling over into the nearby neighborhood. Last bullet on this slide is that we're renaming the use formerly known as drive-through facility to accessory drive-through. And we'll get into that in a little bit more detail on this slide. So the previous or the current use called drive-through facility is an accessory use, but it was causing confusion because the name was very similar to another use called drive-through establishment. And a drive-through establishment is a principal use, and the drive-through facility is an accessory use, and they are different. So we're changing the name of drive-through facility to accessory drive-through so that people will clearly understand that it is an accessory use. It doesn't change anything, the use, the definition of this. It doesn't change the zoning districts that you can do this in, but it does clarify, again, that this is an accessory use. Also, we're adding a prescribed condition that you can only do an accessory drive-through if it was located, and we added the words "and in operation" on the site on June 1st, 2023, which is the date the UDO went into effect. Prior language was just that an accessory drive-through would be allowed if it was located on the site. And our thinking was, you may have a building that had a drive-through that hadn't been in use for 3 or 4 years. We don't want to continue that use if it had not been in operation on June 1st. So that's an additional prescribed condition. And then finally, an accessory drive-through is different than a drive-through establishment. And I'll just quickly explain the differences. A drive-through establishment is a business where all transactions occur through a drive-up window. So there is no inside. If you want to do business, whatever it is, a bank or a restaurant or something, they don't have any seating. You make all your transactions by driving up to windows. An accessory drive-through, on the other hand, is a drive-through window that is added, is part of an existing business, like a bank. A bank may have a lobby and a counter and tellers inside, and also have a drive-through window. Those drive-throughs would be considered accessory drive-throughs. Same with a restaurant, typically a fast food restaurant. If a restaurant has indoor seating and counters and people that take your order, but they have a drive-through window, that is an accessory drive-through. So, but we want to make sure and add this condition that in order to be considered and to have an accessory drive-through, a restaurant or a bar has to have at least 24 seats, either indoor or outdoor, so that it truly is an accessory to a restaurant and not just a principal drive-through. We are clarifying the language on sidewall heights, which a sidewall is the side of a building that faces the side of the parcel and typically fronts on your next door neighbor's parcel. And a typical building will have two sidewalls, one on the right and one on the left. We're not talking about the front wall or the rear. And for in our neighborhood 1 zoning districts, since we now allow duplexes and triplexes as a permitted use, we wanted to make sure that these higher density dwellings, 2-family and 3-family, don't overwhelm in size the surrounding neighborhood. And so we're limiting the sidewall height of those infill duplexes and triplexes to 20 feet. This was previously and is currently in the UDO, but the language was causing some confusion. And so we are trying to tighten up the language so that this is a little easier to understand. And we've adjusted the drawing as well. I should mention that the 20-foot limit is typically for duplexes and triplexes that are going into neighborhoods with predominantly single-story or maybe 2-story houses. But if you're doing a duplex or triplex in an existing neighborhood where the predominant height of other houses is maybe 3 stories or their sidewalls are greater than 20 feet, you can average the sidewall height of the house on either side of your duplex or triplex, and your sidewall height can now go taller than 20 feet. It can go up to the average of the houses on either side. We also added some language, that if you don't have a house next door, maybe you're on a corner lot or maybe there's a vacant lot next door, we clarify which houses, nearby houses, you should use if you want to average the sidewall. Finally, there's a laundry list of other things that this text amendment will do. It clarifies that if there's a conflict between standards, in other words, we hope that there isn't. We try to eliminate conflicts in the UDO, but we may find one, or someone may find one and point it out to us. If there is a conflict between standards, this text amendment will add language that the most restrictive standard would apply. And this is consistent with language that we had in our previous zoning ordinance. We have added some general definitions in Article 2. These are general, defined terms as opposed to use definitions, which are found in Article 15, the uses article. These are general definitions. They're typically terminology that is used in the UDO that we think we need to define. We are clarifying the applicability of a frontage type, which is called other-primary frontage, when it abuts a neighborhood 1 place type. We clarify that the lot standards, such as the minimum lot width or the minimum lot size, those types of standards do not apply to sublots. The text amendment would allow multifamily stack development to front on common open space. Clarifies the limitation on uses and structures and the setback. Changes the notation in the use matrix for multifamily stacked in N1F from X, which means allowed, to PC, which means it has prescribed conditions. This goes back to that item I previously talked about a few slides earlier, where we moved that prescribed condition from Article 4 to Article 15. Again, I know this is really in the weeds, but we want to be thorough. And then finally, the text amendment would provide permission for an electronic sign for private recreation clubs. So that was a lot to cover in a short period. But again, those are the areas that this text amendment will address. And I think we've been pretty thorough. I don't think you'll find that there's anything that we haven't covered in one way or the other. In the future, we anticipate continuing with text amendments that will be needed for various reasons. The first on this list is that the council has referred to the planning department to come up with some recommendations for duplex and triplex dwellings in larger projects. So that's something that we're currently working on, and we anticipate a future text amendment dealing with that topic. Recently, the General Assembly just passed a bill that made some changes to the residential building code, which will affect certain elements of the UDO. And so we know that we're going to have to go in and figure out what needs to be updated in the UDO to comply with that new bill. We think there are going to be additional use and development standards that will need cleanup. We think and we anticipate that there will be future cleanup text amendments dealing with things that we have not dealt with in this current one. We know that our code enforcement people still have other issues that they would like to see clarified and dealt with in a future text amendment. And then finally, the campus zoning districts have been a source of great confusion to most people, and we certainly understand why that is. And so we're currently making an effort to clarify as best we can the campus zoning districts so that they are more similar in structure and nature with the other zoning districts, because right now the uses that are allowed in the campus zoning districts are not portrayed in the same way as for other zoning districts. So we're working on a fix for that. In terms of what we're doing to get the word out on this text amendment, this is we classify our text amendments as either technical or policy based. And this current cleanup text amendment is clearly technical. It deals with fixing of wording and other issues that there is no real change in policy. There will be other future text amendments that will be policy based. For example, if we do a text amendment that deals with duplexes and triplexes and large projects, the council referral that I just talked about, that will have policy implications. And so that will be a policy-based text amendment. But and that may have other additional community engagement strategies associated with it. But for technical text amendments such as this, we are having these virtual information sessions. We are posting information on the UDO website. And in a couple of slides, I'll show you where to go for that. We're also using our social media to create awareness over this, as well as sending out information through our mailing lists and UDO website subscribers. Council will have a public hearing on this, and those are televised on the city's YouTube channel as well as the Gov channel. And again, public information session today. Okay, I mentioned you can go to the Charlotte UDO website. It's charlotteudo.org. And in our menu bar at the top, you will see something that says UDO amendments. And there's a drop-down list, and you just choose UDO text amendments, and you'll come to this page. And the screen bar here on the page says read the proposed text amendment. And if you click on that, you'll open a red line version of the PDF of the text amendment. It's several pages, about 300 and some pages, I believe. But we wanted to show every change that we're proposing. And so you will see a red line version, meaning, you'll see the language that's being crossed out, eliminated, or changed. And you'll see the new language also. All the changes are done in red. What's next for this? We anticipate that we will likely make adjustments to what's in this text amendment based on the feedback that we're receiving. If we do make adjustments, we will post notification of what those adjustments are. And again, a public hearing currently scheduled for November. That could change based on the extent of any adjustments that may need to be made. We will go to our zoning committee of our planning commission for a recommendation, and ultimately city council will vote on this text amendment. So that concludes the slides that we have for today. And at this time, I'm looking in the chat, and I know Kevin is also Prod has got a question about Dormers and Gable modified language.
Before we get to Prod, Angela actually had her hand up first, and I know she's been waiting quite a while. So I think her hand came up during the affordability period discussion. Okay. So Angela, if you'd like to come off mute and ask your question or make your comments, that'd be great. Angela? Well, I think she was also in her car too, so she may be trying. I think she's just come up. Yes, Angela.
It wouldn't let me. Yeah, it wouldn't let me. I was trying to type it really fast. It wouldn't let me talk. I kept hitting the button. It kept saying "hold to unmute it." Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate that. Yeah. So here's my question, because it's about the affordability. I noticed that we went back and I think we added now, if on the, I guess, N1 neighborhoods, if you do a quad, you have to, the fourth unit be affordable. But is it my understanding that we're adding 15-year affordability to that unit that would be for affordable housing?
Yes, that's correct. Only one of the 4 units in the quad has got to be set aside for affordable, but it does have to be, it has to remain affordable for 15 years. And those affordability periods, either the 30-year or the 15-year for the quads, were established by our Housing and Neighborhood Services Department, who does all of the city's affordable housing activities, and those are their recommendations for the affordability periods. And I believe
I was just going to add, I'm sorry to jump in. No, I'm just trying to make sure I understand. I don't disagree. I'm part of those committees. I'm on the Nest Commission as well. But I'm just trying to understand, what does that look like in play? So if someone was going to, let's say, build it and sell it, I guess what they're saying is, I guess, like, if I'm developer, right, and I'm going to build, take advantage of this and build an affordable unit, I plan on selling it. You understand what I'm saying? Like, I'm building it to sell it. So
yes.
Is there like something provided, I guess, I don't know,
deed restriction.
So we're going to put it on a deed restrictions for that buyer to have to agree to continue affordability. And is that affordability at 80%? Is that what we're saying?
It is 80%.
Okay.
And it's a deed restriction. And my understanding is that Housing and Neighborhood Services will continue to monitor that unit for the duration of that affordability period.
Okay. And then the difference of the other one, the larger, what was that? How is that playing out? Like the other option that I heard you say?
Yeah, the other option is the affordable incentives in our development bonus section, which is typically a height bonus. You're allowed to build taller than the maximum height of your zoning district if you provide either affordable units or, in some cases, in most cases, actually a fee in lieu of actually providing the affordable units. And the fee goes to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and then the city uses it to assist with affordable housing. That is also a deed restriction, and that's a 30-year affordability period, also monitored by Housing and Neighborhood Services.
So you're saying, like in your example where we talked about, because this had come up where I was a little bit confused with the sidewall heights and all of that. If you were doing something like in that space and you wanted to build taller, that's sort of an exemption for that. Is that what you're saying? If you keep it affordable for 30 years, am I understanding that right?
Yeah, it's a little bit detailed. There are several ways that you can do it, and
Can I
it's
jump in here briefly?
please.
Because I think I might have heard the question a different way. Angela, is your question regarding the space for development of those duplexes and triplexes and infill and increasing height on those?
Yes. Is that something
Okay.
that you could, yeah. Am I thinking
Yeah.
wrong?
No,
I was just trying to see if that could be applied,
N-
like you can go higher now because you're going to
No,
agree to
no,
this.
you can't. You can't.
No,
That's why I wanted to jump in and see if I heard your
thank you.
question right.
Okay.
Yeah.
yeah, thank you, Kevin. I didn't, yes.
With regard to the sidewalls in that space, particularly with the duplexes and triplexes, your sidewalls are going to be at that 20-foot max, no matter what, unless the surrounding development around you all has higher sidewalls than that, which then you could potentially increase your height of those sidewalls by doing a height survey of those and using the average. But the height bonus would not come into play in the duplex or triplex scenarios in infill in neighborhoods.
Gotcha. Thank you for clarifying. I appreciate you for doing
Sure.
Thank you,
that.
Kevin. I think now, Rod, you've got a question about dormers and gable modified language?
Yes, that's correct. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. So yeah, I was reading through the specific text amendments in the document, and I was looking at Article 4, page 5, Section 2. If I'm not sure if you're able to pull it up onto the screen or would like to discuss that further, but basically, can you explain to me the modification of the text mentioning the cumulative width of the dormers extending into and through the building height plane shall be limited to 25% of the depth of the sidewall. So you're basically restricting the third level to a certain width for that extension of dormer gable, right?
That is the intent. The intent is to not permit, and I'm going to share because I do have the drawing called up, and so let me just share that. So this is the revised drawing. This is Article 4. This is on page 4-7 of the text amendment. So it shows a pitched roof. The blue lines on either side are the two sidewalls of this hypothetical building. And then you have a dormer that comes out and it kind of pokes through that 45-degree height plane that we've established. What this does, and the language is up here on the previous page, I apologize for scrolling. It's this section, this last paragraph, the cumulative width of dormers extending into and through the building height plane shall be limited to 25% of the depth of the sidewall. So what that's intended to do is to not have that a solid dormer that goes the whole length of the building front to back, which essentially forms a third story to that building. And that's not what that's not the intent. The intent is, yes, you can have that pitched roof, and you can have dormers that protrude through that 45-degree height plane, but you can't do it for the whole front to back of that building.
Okay. So my concern on that is basically like I'm not a builder, but if I were to imagine a layout for a home that would have, let's just say, even the minimum of a one-car garage, let's just say, one car, or even if I could try to do a front to back two-car garage with a one-car width, garage width. and then basically be able to put a living room, kitchen area, etc. Then that kind of pushes my ability to fit a bedroom. And of course we have our standard at this point at 3-bedroom, 2.5, or two bathroom. And my only concern is that if it's restricted to 25%, that might restrict the ability to make even a 3rd bedroom at sometimes. I mean, so my question is basically, instead of 25%, is there a possibility to make it to about like 65 or 70%? Now, I understand the full width of the the 3rd floor would be definitely something of a concern, but at least is there a possibility to keep it open to increase the percentage from 25%?
I honestly, based on our extensive conversations around this issue, I don't think that's something that we would support, because our intent is to clearly not have these infill houses kind of overwhelm adjacent houses that are maybe only 1 story or 1.5 stories or 2. And what you're suggesting is kind of what we're trying to avoid, which is essentially creating a 3rd story on that side. You say 60%, but what's the right number? I understand the issue. That 3rd floor, or what actually amounts to an attic, really. I suppose you could create some usable space there using dormers, but I don't think that we would support a change to increase that 25%.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I have to still go into the document to see, but if the modifications for like the width of the parking area or the driveway to duplex and triplex, and I'm just considering just basically a standard lot from like a N1C or N1D perspective, and N1C and N1D allows for a smaller lot area. So of course, with the smaller lot area, that kind of restricts the ability to put a certain type of parking and whatnot. N1A and N1B might not necessarily have that issue, but N1C and N1D is where I might see that might come up as an issue. So if a garage is occupying at least the 1st floor, and earlier before the UDO was even passed, there was even a suggestion to keep the sidewalls up to like 10 or 12 feet. So that in itself was already a concern previously for me. So yeah, that was just what I wanted to clarify. I mean, I think I'm just thinking that the 25% might be too small in my perspective.
Okay. Thank you.
We had another attendee that had their hand up. I think it was Corey, but it looks like he's dropped off, or maybe he lost connection. So we can move to the chat. And Roy, I think, had a follow-up question circling back to some of the discussion surrounding affordability periods and the development bonus.
Yes.
Roy, I see you're still here with us. Do you want to come off mute and walk us through your question?
I think I understand Roy's question. So let me give it a shot. Roy, I think you're talking about the mixed income bonus in neighborhood 1, voluntary mixed income bonus.
Try again, Roy. You should be able to unmute.
Okay, I got it now. Thank you. Yeah, I think Alan might have started to answer this. I just realized we've got development bonus as a term in Article 4.5, which is where I was looking.
Right.
When you were talking before, it sounded like you might have been referring to the development bonus in Article 16 for actual height in non-N1 neighborhoods.
That's correct. And the bonus that you're asking about, the voluntary mixed income in Article 4, it does have a 15-year affordability period, and that's already in that language in Article 4. So we didn't need to address it through a text amendment because we already have the affordability period already in the ordinance.
Question on that. You mentioned the deed restrictions earlier. So the deed restrictions are literally, if somebody buys it, they meet the criteria, they have a deed restriction. When they go to sell it, they have to meet the same criteria.
Yeah, not our area necessarily of expertise, but my understanding is that the deed restriction goes with the property and that future buyers are subject to the same conditions.
I find it interesting. I've done apartment lending over the years and I understand the deed restrictions, but I've never really thought about having them on a, John Smith owns a townhome unit in Charlotte and he's got to meet the criteria when he goes to sell. I think it's difficult. I mean, I'm not objecting to it. I just think it's difficult to watch and monitor and, have them understand what they're doing.
So I can chime in just a little bit. I might be able to help. So they do that every day. Like a lot of times, I don't know if you're familiar with the House Charlotte program the city of Charlotte does up to 30,000. They just did they have 80,000. And what they do is those restrictions are actually 30 years and they have first right of refusal. So like if a buyer, that they sell it and the buyer may take advantage of that, any future buyer they're subject to those deed restrictions. And even with like some of the affordable housing, like I'm doing an affordable housing development that I'm selling right now. And it's just 265 price points. They have to be an affordable buyer and they have to agree to sell to another affordable buyer when they sell it at the 80% AMI. So yes, so that is something that I think that's what their intention is, and it's been going on for a little while. I didn't know if you were done because I had another quick question.
What?
That's
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah, let's see if we can circle back to you, Angela. I see Corey, who had his hand up previously, has now rejoined the call, and then I see Deborah also added a comment in the chat. So Corey, if you'd like to come off mute, I know we dropped your connection here, but be happy to hear what you had to say or what question you have.
Oh yeah, sorry about that. My computer actually died. So I had to plug it back in real quick, but we're back on. We're all good. I just had a quick question regarding sidewall height. We mentioned that there was a 20-foot maximum sidewall height for triplexes within neighborhoods that are typically single-story family or single-family homes that are single-story around there. And for a triplex, I didn't know if regarding the middle unit, say the other two sides of the triplex were still within that 20-foot restriction, but the roof obviously has a pitch. Could that middle unit hypothetically have like a third story in the attic per se?
Yes, we've actually talked about that scenario. And Kevin, if I'm saying something that is not what we agreed on, I know you're going to let me know, but we really still think in that kind of a scenario, that building, it still only has two sidewalls. And if you're talking about a triplex with side by side units, and there's a middle unit, if that middle unit stays within that 45-degree height plane and doesn't exceed the maximum height of the zoning district, then it can get taller. The two sidewalls are still the two sidewalls.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I may not be making it clear or not, but here, let's see.
Yeah, picture is worth 1,000 words.
I know. Let me see if I can share my thing here. I got a quick depiction of.
And Corey, I'm sorry, but I'm not sure we want to make any kind of sweeping decisions based on looking at your screen.
I'm better at showing what I'm talking about than explaining what I'm talking about.
Well,
if that's something that we can deal with, through email, and you can.
I was just going to say the same thing, Alan. Like this. Yeah,
but it would essentially just be like, obviously both of these are 20-foot sidewalls, but then the middle unit would just have essentially a third story in the roof almost.
Yeah, I would say that looks okay to me. Again, this is just kind of, without just speaking, off the cuff, but at first glance, as long as those two sidewalls, the one on the left and the one on the right, don't exceed the 20 feet, and that roof pitch is, 45 degrees or less, and yeah, and the overall height is, within the max allowed by the district. It's either 40 or 48, depending on the district. That
Yeah,
looks
something
okay
like
to
this,
me.
I wouldn't see going over maybe 35 tops, but
Yeah.
okay, yeah, that was just something I'd, back of the napkin had been wondering on. So I appreciate you answering that question.
Yeah, no,
And-
that looks good.
And honestly, Corey, we'd be happy to receive that example from you if you'd be willing to provide it to us at that email that we provided earlier.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, that'd be
Yeah,
terrific.
it's helpful for our discussions on this side as we think through these things.
Yeah, I mean, as a builder, obviously, you're trying to, meet all the guidelines required, but I mean, still provide, something that's attractive and obviously appealing to a customer. We have a lot of families moving in that, want that kind of a bigger feel in the interior, but not necessarily something that is out of character for the neighborhood.
Right. Thank you very much, Corey. Deborah, you wanted to have a little bit more of a discussion, and then time permitting, Angela, we should be able to circle back to you. Deborah, you want to come off mute?
Doing it. There it is. Okay. Yes, I just come back to the picture that you put up about driveways and parking areas for triplexes and duplexes. I'm interested in what you're offering to what the change is going to be for that refines the driveway issue.
okay, I'm gonna go there, give me a minute to get there. And it's in Article 19. 5, I think. When I get there, I will share
Okay.
screen with everybody. Getting close, here it is. All right, let me share my screen. What I'm sharing is the red line version of the text amendment
Okay.
showing the language that changes, and it's in Article 19.6, design of surface parking and parking lots. And it's for the section on duplex, triplex, and quadruplex
Right.
dwellings on individual lots. And it says the new language is the underlined in red. So it reads, driveways and parking pads shall have a maximum width of 40% of the lot width up to a maximum of 24 feet in width between any part of the street-facing facade and the front lot line. For corner lots, additional driveways and parking pads may be allowed on the side street, but shall not exceed the permitted width as determined by the front lot width. So what we were trying to clarify is that that 24 feet where you can put your driveways and parking pads in the front are between the front facing facade of the building and the front lot line. People were manipulating the configuration of buildings to try to get around or change.
Well, what about if there's a sidewalk? Where's the lot line if there's a sidewalk? The lot line ends at the...
It varies. It varies. Some
Okay.
sidewalks are outside the lot line within the public right of way, within the street right of way, and I know some sidewalks are on the private property, typically with an easement. So it's typically the lot line is on the house side of the sidewalk, but not always.
Right. Okay. And so for all of this, what's the maximum length of the driveway then? What does it have to be?
There's a minimum length of 20 feet.
20
there is
feet.
no maximum length. But
Okay.
there's a minimum length of 20 feet. It's right here in this paragraph that I'm highlighting.
Okay.
Driveways and parking pad spaces shall be a minimum of 20 feet in length as measured from the right of way back of sidewalk or back of a shared use path, whichever is greater.
Okay.
So in this case, it
So if
depends
there's
on.
if there's a public sidewalk, then it has to be from the back. Okay. All right. Well,
Yeah.
that was what I was trying to wrap my head around. Thank you for that.
Okay.
I'll look it up and so I can print it off and read it more carefully.
All right.
I appreciate it. Looks
Thank
like
you.
you've done some good jobs. I really like the the height stuff that you have clarified, especially that you can't go back to the side setbacks to, by increasing the side setbacks that you can raise
Right.
the height.
Right.
I like that
Okay.
very, very much. That's a good thing. So I appreciate it. Thank you very much. That answers my question. I'll continue to listen, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Deborah. Angela, you had another question. Angela, are you still with us?
I'm
still
trying to-
here, but my question has gotten answered.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. Fair enough.
Okay. And one more question, Kevin, that I saw that I just want, it won't take long, but Roy is asked, considering revising rules for duplexes and triplexes and larger parcels, basically what constitutes a larger parcel. We don't know yet, Roy, that's part of our work to figure that out, whether it's based on acreage or a number of buildings or structures. We don't know yet. That council has only instructed us with the language that they gave us, which is go and take a look at these larger projects. So I think it's kind of incumbent upon us to try to figure out what the intention is. What do they mean by larger? And so we're going to look at various ways of defining that. I see we're right at 7 o'clock, and I think we have tried to address all of the questions that we have seen. So I'd like to thank you all for coming. This is a great turnout on a Wednesday evening. So I appreciate it. And
May I,
again,
before we adjourn, Alan, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to do a few housekeeping comments. That's to say, the slide deck from the presentation earlier will be available for viewing on the UDO website. It'll be at the same location that Alan described, where you could read the text amendment. Additionally, the recording of both the noon earlier session and this session will be available for viewing on the Planning, Design, and Development YouTube channel by the end of this week. So if at any time you'd like to revisit either the discussions or the presentation material, there are resources out there for you to do so. That's all I had, Alan. Thank you.
thank you, Kevin. Good night, everybody.